today I'm going to present for you my state of the industry. So, bit of housekeeping. So, just in case you don't know, this is the group is formed from the Internet Dating Excellence Association. Our overarching goal is to help grow the dating industry and help you learn, share, and connect. And we also have something called Idea Gold now, which is to help you even more if you want to opt into paid services. You can get consultancy and agency services along with a raft of other stuff. And also, I'd recommend having a look at the Instant Advisory Board, which is our other hot ticket. So that is brand new. It's powered by Cortland Brooks, which is the agency that I've run since 2005. Also wanted to thank our sponsor today, which is Dating Through Curiosity. You'll see Barry and Joey around, and I do recommend having a chat with them. They've got a very interesting product, which I think is very resonant for the dating industry. I'll tell you a bit more about that later. So, without further ado, I'm going to present over the next half an hour my state of the industry, which is something I used to do every year at the iDate Internet Dating Conference for many years. Over 40 of these presentations I've done, but I've not done one in a couple of years. So it's high time I got back into the fashion of doing these. So over the next half an hour, I'm going to give you an overview of the dating industry, where it stands, where the challenges are, and what we might be able to do about it. So I'll give you the history and heritage of IDEA, our purpose and vision, the initiatives that we're working on. I'm then going to talk about the industry numbers, some very interesting numbers, and some interesting behaviors and opportunities, challenges. And if I've got time, I'm not sure if I'll have time, but if I've got time, I'll also cover the top 2024 news. Who's written the most? What are the top companies for news in 2024? I'm just going to briefly show you my story and how we can possibly be inspired by it and how you can be involved in IDEA moving forward. So what is IDEA? IDEA is the Internet Dating Excellence Association. We were actually called the Internet Dating Executive Alliance for the first few years, actually, from 2007 for around about 15 years. And the whole point of IDEA was not to have a point, just to have a drink, get together, get to know each other a bit. And in the business of love, I always say we should all get along. So that was kind of the point of it. That was our history and heritage. But originally, going back before that, my background, I started an adventure club in Silicon Valley called ACE Club, which stood for Adventure, Camaraderie, and Entertainment. I grew that club to 3,600 members and came across and started working with the very first dating app I ever worked with back in 2000. And it was way ahead of its time, actually. It was almost like a precursor to eHarmony. We actually had 2,000 questions on the highest level of a number of questions, and I had a really cool widget. Wonderful service, actually. Then I joined Friendster in 2002 and helped out with their events and also did some PR for them. And then I started Online Personals Watch in 2004. I joined FriendFinder back then and realized that I was getting some very interesting news coming across my desk and didn't have time to read it. So I figured I bet that my CEO and a bunch of other CEOs also don't have time to read this. Somebody should summarize the news. And nobody was. So that's how I started Online Personals Watch. And then went on to start IDEA in 2007, and which then morphed into a new form of IDEA, a little bit more, shall we say, formalized the idea in 2018. We've got 700 members. 60% of them are owners and CEOs. Most of the majors are represented. Beyond that, there's Cortland Brooks, which I should tell you about. We help iDating companies grow. We power IDEA and IDEA Gold. And we do strategy, biz dev, marketing. And we're also doing some interesting work with influencer marketing. We've worked with the likes of the Meat Group for 6 years with the Parship Meat Group, and Jaumo and Plenty of Fish. I was 6 years with Plenty of Fish, and Friend.ly. And actually, we've worked with 130 dating companies at this stage. And these are the offerings that we've got. If you'd like to have a look at that, let me know if you've got any questions. It would be my pleasure to tell you more about this. Purpose and vision. The purpose is really to help, IDEA's purpose is to help the dating industry achieve its potential. I think we have scratched the surface. It's my hypothesis that we can really do a lot more to help people. And now certainly with the growing of AI poses a simultaneous opportunity and considerable threat. So hopefully we can help the industry navigate that. So we're all about growing through helping you learn, share, and connect. But we're in tough times right now. So what do people think of online dating? Here's an interesting chart. What you see here along the left side are a number of dating companies, a lot across the top. our survey results that Consumer Reports ran, and red is bad, green is good. And you can see there's only one showing of hope here, and that's for Tinder, for value. And the rest is a sea of red. And you might think that this was done just a few months back, but actually, this survey was done in 2016. And what it shows is that back then, as now, I think, iDating users were dealing with a fairly frustrated group. But the one sign of hope that people said here, the thing that users said, which is very encouraging, is that internet dating is frustrating, but it delivers results. And I think that kind of is the truth of what we're dealing with. It's a tough crowd, but it's a tough context. What are some initiatives that we're working on? You can always get the intelligence from the news at Online Personals Watch. We've had the same team working on Online Personals Watch since 2005. And you can also come to these LTR conferences every month. We do these like clockwork every month. And also, the GDI, there's the GDI gatherings, which I recommend in person. We do occasionally do Idea Summit conferences for established dating companies to meet and compare notes on the industry. And then if for growth, have a look at Idea Gold. What are the numbers for the industry? Let's have a look at how many people meet through online dating these days. Apparently 12% of couples, according to this Mail Online survey, met online in the period of 2000 to 2005. Primarily people met through friends. What does that look like now? Now, 59% actually of people are meeting online. So things have certainly changed over the last 20 years. So what are the worldwide online dating revenues now? And what's the forecast? These numbers are from market.us, and they say that as of November 2024, and these are from November 2024, actually, but basically they're saying that by 2033, the industry should be over $18 billion a year. And right now it stands at about $10, $11 billion, which sounds about right to me. Where's our revenue typically coming from? Subscription. We know this, of course. Market.us is telling us subscriptions. This is from 2023. I would have thought it'd be higher than 70%, actually. But yeah, if you take subscriptions and kind of ongoing payments, then I'm sure it's at least 70%. Well, what do revenues look like in the USA? Well, according to IBIS World, that has a report on this, they're saying that it's about $3.6 billion a year in 2024. And revenue, unfortunately, is flat. So what is the average profit margin in the USA? Profit margin is about 13%, basically, according to IBIS. And how much of the market does Match Group own? About 50%. So how about Match Group worldwide revenues? We can see the numbers here, and the revenues of Match are around about $3.5 billion total. And how about Asia? If we look at the numbers across Match Group, Asia is doing about $300 million a year. Tinder is the behemoth, of course, with $2 billion a year revenue, and Hinge at over 500 million. How about Tinder versus Hinge growth? Let's have a look at Tinder first. So Tinder revenues are fairly flat, coming at about $1.9 billion in 2024. How about the paying user trend? So this is what the analysts of dating companies are really looking at. They're looking at Tinder paying members, and they're seeing that the number of members is going down, but revenue isn't. So they're actually really optimizing and finding new ways to add value, shall we say, and extract more revenue from the same number and actually less number of users. They had 9.7 paying users as of Q4 2024, but revenue is flat. So let's look at Hinge. How's Hinge compare? Hinge is doing great. And the way I look at this picture is that Match is clearly re-optimizing people away from Tinder towards Hinge. This is the product that's more serious, shall we say, or more meaningful. And that's why they brought it. That's why they bought it. That's why they've developed it. They actually bought this property in 2018. How's Bumble look in comparison? So Bumble's revenues are about $1.1 billion in 2024, and they are also flat. Let's have a look at Parship Meet Group. So Bumble, of course, has Badoo as well. It's not just Bumble. They also used to have Fruits, but they just shuttered Fruits. How about Parship Meet Group? So Parship Meet Group owns eHarmony, Meet Me, Scout, Tagged, Growler, And then in Europe, Parship and Lavu. And they peaked in 2021. They had really a COVID bump. They did very well during COVID. Meet Me was is a video first product, and that did especially well. And now the revenues are about 375 million euros in 2024. And what's their quarterly growth curve look like? Here it is. Basically, what's happening here is US competitors are really putting the squeezes on Parship Meat Group. They've got a lot more video first competitors that have sprung up since COVID. Europe revenues are more stable, meanwhile. But yeah, so who's the number 4 player in the market? And the number 4 player is actually Grindr. And it looks like Grindr is going to come through and actually beat Parship Meat Group in 2025, given the trajectory of the two companies. They did $344 million in 2024, and they aim to reach apparently $600 million in revenue by 2027. So how many dating businesses are in the USA? Back in 2012, according to IBIS World, there were over 2,000 dating companies, dating properties in the US, and that's now around 500. So it's really fallen off considerably, as you'd kind of expect. I mean, there were so many companies and apps being sprung up. Eventually, things would have to settle down. There's only so many companies that will be able to get to critical mass, and it's settled in at around 500 companies now. What was interesting in the IBIS World report is that they said that the barriers to entry are low for the dating industry. And that's absolutely not true. We have very high barriers to entry because it's not so easy getting approved on the Apple Store these days, of course. It's not so easy getting approved to do Facebook advertising. There are certain doors that are closed more and more. Certainly payment processing, if you're doing non-app, is not easy at all. So let's have a look at the stock market. How has the market received Match, Bumble, and Grindr? We can see red Grindr stock, which is up 68% year over year, by the way. And in light blue, we can see Match, which is down 11% as of this report, actually, year over year. And then in Bumble is yellow, and they're down 57%. So it is a rough time to be in the dating business. And this really sets the trend and the sentiment really for investors for VC. You would think, on the other hand, I think what might be happening here is investors are starting to think, okay, maybe there's some opportunity for disruption. So on the other hand, it's not such a bad time to be pitching dating businesses. So if you want to look at the latest financial reports, by the way, we have a wonderful page on Online Personals Watch. If you look on the right-hand side, you'll see public companies. And we've got these one pages laid out for you if you'd like to get a synopsis at any stage of how the public companies are doing. So how should we categorize the dating industry now in terms of, say, volatility? The world categorize us as high volatility and marginal growth. So we're in this roller coaster camp right now. So hold on to your hats. How about matchmakers and singles events? IBIS World is saying that matchmakers are coming in at several $100 million a year. And in the US, which is very bullish. I'm not sure if it's quite that high. Mobile dating, 1.6 billion, coupled with online dating at 600 or so. So 2.2, 2.3 billion in the US. It's obviously a massive market. Singles events coming in at like over $400 million, which I also think is a little bit bullish. What age groups use online dating the most in the USA? So you can see in blue here, that's the 18 to 29 group. And IBIS World is saying that's about 41% of the market, followed by 30 to 49-year-olds, representing about 32% of the market. And then in red, we've got the 50 to 64-year-olds coming in at $500 million and 16% of the market. And then orange is 65 plus, about 11% of the market. Let's talk about behavior. Why do people use dating apps? This is a survey that was done by Appinio with 500 women and 500 men in the UK in 2023. And they showed that 71% of respondents said that they were in it for a relationship. Meanwhile, 8% were merely there to boost their self-esteem. They admitted that was their primary cause. And 6% were there for finding friends, 6% that were there for one-night stands, so purely casual, and 5% friends with benefits, and 4% were good enough to admit that they were simply killing time. So that's quite interesting to know. How good are relationships that originate on online dating apps? we should ask. There was actually a study done on this in the Journal of Social Sciences in 2024, and it was a survey of 233 US college students, so not entirely representative, but interesting nonetheless. And they assessed relationship satisfaction. They looked at intimacy and trust. And the results showed comparable levels of satisfaction and what they call belongingness. So that's encouraging. So what's our problem? What's our main problem? Well, according to The Guardian, in December 2024, they ran an article which said that online dating feels like a chore with Ofcom. And basically, Ofcom's Online Nation report revealed a 16% decline in the use of the top 10 dating apps between 23 and 24. Meanwhile, the Leeds Center for Love, Sex and Relationships attributed the decline to user fatigue and a sense of detachment from reality. So how do people interact with daters of varying attractiveness and other behavior? So this one book I'd highly recommend you have a look at, by the way, is a book called Dataclysm by Christian Rudder. It's a classic back from 2014. So this is a fairly dated survey, but stands nonetheless, I think, true for us today. This is a graph of messages sent versus attractiveness. So the attractiveness is along the bottom. So they've got the 90th percentile, people who are really getting very well rated. And you can see that they're getting the lion's share of the communications. Nothing surprising here. But what's interesting is the difference between women and men. I mean, men we know get quite a bit more attention at the upper echelon, but women truly, truly get inundated, which is really why I think Bumble rose to fame. They shot for the soft underbelly of Tinder, and the women that were feeling inundated on Tinder found a home on Bumble where they could where they could do outreach initially, and it kind of put women in control. And that was a sensible strategy for women who were being inundated, completely inundated on Tinder, the attractive women essentially. So where did they go? They would go over to Bumble. I think that's the real crux of how they grew so quickly. And now they've done away with that, apparently. They no longer have just women able to do the first move. So how about if we turned off pictures on a dating app? Would that make any difference? This was an interesting experiment, also from Dataclysm. Christian was with OkCupid, and they ran quite a lot of surveys, and they still do. You can look at this blog, actually. Look at the OkCupid blog, and you see all sorts of fantastic surveys that were done. So with this particular one, it was done on an app called Crazy Blind Date, which was launched in 2013. And what was interesting about Crazy Blind Date is there are no pictures, right? So this is actually a graph of male attractiveness versus female date satisfaction, right? So you can see the male attractiveness to the right is you've got men much hotter, then you've got even in the middle. And what this basically shows is that women had a good time 75% of the time on the dates. Meanwhile, FYI, that's a different graph, but men reported having a good time 85% of the time, irregardless of the disparity in looks. So those that ventured out had a good time pretty much regardless, independently of attractiveness. But we see a very different world. How does satisfaction compare with apps, with pictures? Christian was also able to see this on OkCupid because that's where everybody has photographs, right? So in red, you can see her happiness in person on Crazy Blind Date across the realms of looks, right? So it's fairly evenly distributed for female happiness from a date. This is the response to male attractiveness. So if somebody messages, what's the response percentage? What is the response probability? And without pictures, people are generally responding. With pictures, people who are not that hot are just not getting responses. So it really changes. It turns out in real life, looks are less important, but we have exacerbated this effect by showing and leading with pictures all the time. This is a challenge. So what's the future hold? Where might we find inspiration? I think we can actually look to these shared interest platforms. There's some quite interesting ones that are popping up. Strava even. Strava has 135 million members now and is growing at 20% clip. You can go to Letterboxd and track films that you've watched, and that is a community for film lovers. And you can basically tell your friends what's good. They're growing at 50%. So people do connect around things other than hotness and looks and dating. But we can be inspired by the dynamics on these communities, I believe. How about events? Well, young singles seem to be favoring offline dating events a little bit more. Eventbrite is reporting a 42% increase in dating events from 22 to 23. But my advice with events is if you're going to do events, they are a headache. They are really a headache. But if you're going to do events, you've got to do amazing events that people talk about. Because if you do mediocre events, then people just aren't going to say good things, and it doesn't really work for online dating apps. So the trick is to do events that garner word of mouth and help build trust in your brand and show that you're real. Should we be helping singles improve their dating skills? I think so. I think this is a huge opportunity. But there's a trick to this. And Dating Through Curiosity, which is our sponsor, by the way, and I hold them very high esteem for the very good work that they're doing and a massive amount of experience they've got in teaching real world skills, real world authenticity building through asking the right questions. There's a lot to be said for facilitation and a lot to be said for helping people actually improve skills. It's not just enough to instruct, show a video, kind of teach. It's what's very important for us is that we actually show people and facilitate and have them practice. And that's exactly what DTC does. So have a look at DTC. They came to me via Jim Safka, by the way, as a former CEO of Match. How about verification and background checks? Do users really want them? This is a survey by TransUnion, so maybe a little bit biased, but it's interesting nonetheless. This is from 2025, and it showed that 60% of people were more likely to contact someone if their profile was verified. They also showed that 85% of respondents said dating platforms should verify information about users, and that 21% have been targeted by scammers in the past. But, as I say, probably a bit biased, but still, I do think that background checks and verification are really quite important parts of the mix of what we do for trust and safety. Will singles pay for background checks, though? Here's another question. Also from TransUnion. So the majority of people apparently would be willing to pay for background checks, according to their surveys. More so, incidentally, for urban dwellers, and slightly more so for 18 to 34-year-olds, interestingly. So what kind of information do singles want to be verified? Apparently they want age, they want the recency of photos, they want selfie checks, and location. These are things that really matter. AI. So what are the key applications for AI? We've all been hearing a lot about AI, and I believe it's a double-edged sword. There are opportunities here, and there are also incredible threats. So what is the impact of AI on online dating? We hear a lot of talk about improving matchmaking, improving compatibility. And I think, how do we inform AI to improve? We need to show it a result. We need to have it optimized for a result. And one could argue that could be a third conversation, perhaps online. We have full and clear visibility on second and third conversations. That's the simplest thing to optimize for. But the real thing to optimize for is a 10-year marriage that doesn't end in divorce and has happy kids. What do we possibly optimize for that? We do not have visibility on that. But there is one company that does, actually, and that's Facebook. So I would not discount the threat of Facebook. There are some significant possibilities that they could come through with something that does improve because they have visibility on this longer tail result. Secondly, virtual dating assistants. We hear talk of this. AI should be able to guide conversations, give advice in the moment, and even schedule dates. Why not? I think there's some opportunity there and an opportunity to monetize. How about trust and safety? Well, look, we have to deal with scammers, spammers, the obscene and the obnoxious. What we could at least be doing at this stage is helping people choose their best photographs. And we see Tinder doing this, and a few dating apps are helping people with this. The area that I'm most concerned about, which I know is a huge opportunity for some companies, is AI-driven virtual companionship. I see this in some ways as a great way to practice what it's like being in a relationship, but it's also a race to the bottom. I think that people will long for real-world relationships as a consequence of a growth of these AI-driven virtual companions. So on the one hand, they will boom. They'll make a lot of money. They might even make more than the dating industry, but they'll also drive a true hunger for real-world connection. So what are the challenges? How do singles regard the quality of our introductions? Based on an American survey center survey of 5,800 people in 2024, we can see the percentage of single Americans who would go on a second date after a bad first date with someone. And what this shows is if people met on a dating app, men would go on a second date after a bad first date 16% of the time, and women 11% of the time. How does that compare with the real world? So if people met through a close friend, men would go on a second date after a bad first date 52% of the time, and women 37% of the time. So this shows you how people regard online dating, really, the efficacy, if you like, of what we do. And people still trust the real world and their friends more in some ways. Question we should ask is, do singles really want to be in a committed relationship? The conclusion of this survey, also through the Survey Center on American Life, is that single women not only reject the idea of marriage, but also believe it's a liability. My God. But 55% of single women said that they think they are happier than married women, which is also not entirely encouraging. How do singles rate their dating lives? Apparently, 67% of daters say their dating life is not going well, and 75% say they found it tough to find people to date. I would turn this around and say, isn't this why they're single? This is why we've got such a tough audience. These are the people coming onto our platforms that aren't very happy. We try, we help them, we help quite a few people, but we don't help them all, and they're not happy as a consequence. How about pricing? We've got to be very careful with pricing. Think back in time to the hotel that you would have gone to several years back that would have charged you $3.50, $4, $5 even for a bottle of water. How incredibly outrageous. I think we've really got to be very careful about maintaining fairness in terms of the pricing that we offer on online dating companies, internet dating. So Tinder's $500 membership, you'll notice, was a very targeted rollout. They rolled it out to people who are well-heeled and likely to convert, and people who were paying members essentially, and among their most avid members. So they were the ones that would be most likely to not think the price was entirely unfair. And we have to be careful as an industry about fairness. It seems to be we're in this kind of $20, $50, maybe as much as $80 a month camp. Meanwhile, matchmakers are charging tens of thousands of dollars. So on the one hand, we've got to be careful with pricing and maintaining fairness, but we also have to bear in mind we're leaving a lot of value on the table. How's our reputation in the press right now? It's looking pretty bad. There's been quite a bit of negativity, unfortunately, about the doom and gloom, the dating industry not doing so well. And, as an industry, we've got to fight back, perhaps. Let's look at the news in 2024. Who was the top reporter of 2024 based on the number of articles that we ran on Online Personals Watch? Coming in at number 3 was Brittany Kiefer. She had 5 articles. Then we have Sydney Bradley. We ran actually 5 articles with her. And then number 1, we ran 12 articles that Lauren Forrestal wrote. And these are not huge numbers, and that tells you that it's nobody's beat. That's what makes doing press PR in the dating industry a little tough, because there's very few reporters that write repeatedly, but there's 3 that do. How about which company had the top press coverage? Bumble in 2024, we ran 76 posts, no less, on Online Personals Watch on Bumble in 2024. Who was number 2? Match Group, of course, with 80 posts. And number 1 was, Tinder. So we had Tinder coming in at number 2 with 80 posts. And we had Match Group coming in at number 1 with 81 posts. So very, very Tinder and Match by far. Now, we don't really have time for this, but if you want a copy of this presentation, you can see it. I've got a few news items about AI and dating news. So let me know if you'd like a copy. Just email if you'd like a copy of this presentation. At the end of the day, the big message I want to send to you is that we're in tough times and we can do this. We need to fight the contagion of bad apps. We need to fight scammers and fakesters and unfair practices. But it's amazing what you can do if you set your mind to it. Case in point, this, by the way, is what flesh-eating disease looks like. This is what I looked like after getting flesh-eating disease and nearly basically dying back in December 2023. What a crazy time. I had flesh-eating, blood sepsis, multi-organ failure, kidneys packed up, and I had no clue about this. It's 50% mortality. But it just goes to show, if you put your mind to it, you can get through anything. And, if I got my message is, if I can get through this, we can get through this tough time in the dating industry. We'll put our minds to it. We'll work together. Let's learn, share, and connect. This is us versus Match. We are the goldfish. Match have half the market. They're a very strong competitor, and they have true economies of scale and know-how. But if we work together and we come together at these LTR events and what have you, it's a true opportunity for you to meet like minds, share, hopefully learn something that can give you an edge. We are the swarm. So what can you do? Well, sign up for OPW, join us for the events, consider Idea Gold. We'd love to help you more. Let me know if you'd like to know more about this. Basically, for the price of a marketing manager, you can get access to a seasoned team of internet dating professionals, essential tools, community, and know-how. Thank you very much. Right, do you have any questions then? I've got 3 questions. Benji, I'm wondering why you think the $400 million for singles events is bullish when the focus, at least from the media perspective, has been more on events. I don't see many national footprint online events companies. I mean, what are the speed dating companies left standing now? I don't see them doing particularly well. So I think it's a very fragmented market. I think there's lots of regional events companies. I mean, what are we including as events? If we're talking nightclub events, maybe singles-oriented events. But if we're talking speed dating events, I'm not seeing it. I'm not. Who's the big speed dating company that's doing $50 million a year? They don't exist. Also, Benji, thank you. The graph about photos attractiveness versus none was fascinating. Was there any follow-up regarding relationship formation? I'm curious of that part of the funnel. I'm not sure. Good question. I'll have to look into it. Eddie, why not discuss the power of matchmaking, which is still growing, or even mention it? I did mention it, didn't Yeah, I mean, several $100 million a year. I'm a believer in matchmaking, but it is distinct from online internet dating, and we're kind of focused on internet dating. So I gave it honorable mention. But, if you really want to know about matchmaking, you should go to the Global Love Conference, which is in early May in New York. And that's where I think there'll be a fantastic gathering of probably well over 100 matchmakers, and that'd be a good place to learn and share together.